Hey guys, what's up? Sanu here. Another day, another DAC review. But in all honesty, you shouldn't skip this one, simply because it has quite some few things which others simply don't. So if you remember, about 1 month ago I have tested one of the most affordable true balancer DACs, which also happened to be one of the best sounding entry-level units that I have tested. So it was called Soncoz SGD1 DAC, and today I'll be talking about its much bigger brother, which is called SGD1, which has quite some interesting stuff going under its hood. So let's go really in depth and see what makes it so different. First of all, SGD1 looks and feels exactly as premium as any top-of-the-line DAC, with its huge matte black case, milled on a CNC machine. The volume knob has an LED strip around it, and only by looking at its light it should be clear where is your volume position, and I think that is pretty cool looking. I've never seen such a clever and extremely easy to use user interface. There is an LCD screen in the middle that will show you only the selected digital input, that coaxial out is engaged, and of course your digital filter, nothing more and nothing less. You can control every feature of it only by using its volume knob or the included remote control, and I really like that too. Soncoz put some ventilation holes under the unit and on its side panels, so that hot air would move away from the unit. At about 3 kilos, SGD1 feels on the heavier side, and it gives an impression of a well-engineered and well-made product. As for controls, SGD1 has a clean-looking front panel with just a volume knob on the right and a sheet of glass exactly in the middle that houses its LCD screen. On the back, most of the digital inputs can be spotted as USB Type-B, USB Type-C to be used with OTG-capable smartphones. There is also an AAC, optical and coaxial input. Do note that it also has a coaxial output, just in case you'll want to convert any of its digital inputs to coaxial and send all that to another converter. Being a fully balanced DAC, it offers a pair of XLR and RCA outputs. Both are working at the same time, and you can have them fixed at full power, or you can lower its signal power if you want. As for the technology under its hood, Soncoz placed 2 DAC chips instead of one, so 2 ESS 9038 Q2M will be completely separating the left and the right signal paths, for a much better channel crosstalk and of course to achieve a better signal-to-noise ratio. One of the coolest design decisions was completely splitting the power supply for its analog and digital section, so that each part would be using a dedicated low-noise linear toroidal transformer. So far, only a single manufacturer from Asia had the same approach, and that was Gustard Audio with their A22 DAC, which is a lot more expensive. There is a decent number of electrolytic capacitors for power filtering and storing, and together with 2 transformers and 3 ultra-low noise voltage regulators, SGD1 achieved one of the lowest noise floors I have ever experienced in digital audio, only 1.3 microvolts. Soncoz also put the best Bluetooth receiver in this one, the mighty CSR 8675 from Qualcomm, so it supports Bluetooth 5.0 and all major audio codecs as AAC, CBC, aptX, aptX HD. For now, it doesn't support LDAC. I'm not sure why my smartphone can't see it as an LDAC capable receiver, but maybe a future firmware update will solve this issue. In terms of sound performance, before I tell you exactly how SGD1 sounds, I want to tell you why I keep going back to this Matrix Audio Element X. So its headphone amp section is okay, but far from great. It can drive the heaviest lows and doesn't have that punch that I search. Its internal streamer is actually much better, very good actually, but it sometimes glitches or even worse, crashes on me. It still needs a little bit of work to be perfect. However, its USB DAC part is unlike most ESS Sabre DACs, so it's extremely detailed, transparent, or should I say the most transparent unit that I have tried so far up to this day at any price point. It is also a very punchy sounding unit, so it simply hits like Thor's hammer, and with some particular tracks that is super engaging, super nasty sounding. Its bass quantity and quality needs to be heard to be believed, and I think that its mid-range presence and density is very alike to an R2R DAC, And don't get me started with its layering and simply an instant rise and decay of those notes in fast executed tracks. It is also far from thin or bright sounding. I'm looking at you, Mytek Brooklyn DAC Plus, and to you Benchmark DAC 3, you nasty ones. It is also far from flabby, slow or muddy sounding. It has the right dose of technicalities but also emotions, so it's neither too wet nor too clinical. Just a perfectly balanced sound like yin and yang. And after engaging the SGD1, I simply spotted absolutely the same bass performance, the same punchy bass performance that I'm so in love with my Element X. Mid-range presence was also spot on, so very present, voice and sounding simply smooth and guttural. Guitars and violins was simply weeping and touching my soul. There was that special ingredient that very few Delta Sigma DACs are having. So it simply knew how to create music, how to envelop me with its musical wizardry, and how to impress a music lover first and a DAC addict later on. Sure, it didn't offer the last drop of resolution, the busiest passages didn't sound as airy and layered, but it easily sounded as a kilobuck digital source, and I couldn't believe that I was listening to a unit that costs less than half a grand. As for its noise floor, imagine simply that a WUN S8 that I have reviewed last week had a super low noise floor of just 2.5 microvolts, and SGD1 is having it at 1.3 microvolts. I consider that my gear, my digital sources, my amplifiers, my transducers and my ears can capture a dirty background, distortion or some gremlins in my music, and as much as I have tried with sensitive IEMs like FIO FI9 or Mesa Rai Penta, I simply couldn't spot any hissing, any humming, just a haunting dead silence in my music. And of course I've experienced absolutely the same in my speaker setup, so I went almost full power on my power amplifier, I've paused my music and I approached those S400 loudspeakers, and there it was, a very loud sound of silence. So SGD1 is simply a dead silence source, and it didn't matter if it was used in a speaker or in a headphone-based setup, the final result was simply the same. I am pretty sure that we have a new winner on our hands in terms of transient response in the sub 1 grand DAC category. It actually sounds pretty much the same as my own Matrix Audio Element X in here. So I love it mostly for its faster pace, but also for delivering more bass layers and air in the lowest octaves. So it isn't a secret to anyone that the hardest frequency range to perfectly control, maintain, and deliver is actually the low end. And I have simply a tremendous respect for DAC manufacturers and digital sources that can properly deliver a bass note exactly how I want it, so carrying just the right amount of quantity but also being clean, defined and super weighty. I want to be clear that a well-engineered DAC should sound exactly like this, and yet very few actually performing at this level. There are many units past $1,000 that don't possess well-balanced tonality, and their punchy dynamics will be felt more like a feather than like a kangaroo. So those two linear transformers actually left their last words exactly in here, and without them I would not be experiencing probably this super punchy and tremendous bass slam and impact. And I'm glad that Soncoz went slightly overkill with the power supply. For the love of music, Soncoz, please use this philosophy in all your future flagship devices. Thank you. As for resolution and details, we're still talking about an ESS hybrid DAC, right? So SGD1 actually uses 2 DAC chips instead of 1 to simply increase its dynamic range, to lower its distortion, and also to lower its channel crosstalk. So even from its first day, it was clear to me that SGD1 presented itself as a clean sounding digital source that really cared about resolution, transparency, and dynamics. So do note that Soncoz actually put the mobile version, this one of the ESS 9038, yet it sounds so amazingly close to my Matrix Audio Element X. I have a very strong feeling that Soncoz simply squeezed the last drop of performance out of this chipset. I can certainly say that SGD1 is about on the same level with kilobuck ESA Sabre DACs, and all in all, SGD1 performed how I would describe a clean, detailed and transparent sounding unit. It had all the traits of modern digital to analog converters, and if you are looking for micro details and imperfections in your music, you can hear that without closing an eye. In terms of soundstage and generally speaking, from Delta Sigma DACs, ESA Sabre DACs like these ones, are those that are sounding simply closer to the listener, so creating this cozy but really upfront sound. Benchmark DAC Free and MyTech Brooklyn DAC Plus are sounding exactly like that, so with a very narrow soundstage and with little to no depth at all. But tinker with their power supplies and filtering, and exactly those DACs that I mentioned are starting playing in much bigger rooms with more air around those instruments and notes and with more depth information. Soundstage can be unleashed even with ESA Sabre DACs if you know how to do that. So there is a reason those two DACs that I have mentioned above are being modified with linear transformers even nowadays. So SGD1 is an airy sounding unit that was felt simply from the first seconds of pressing play. Even crowded music as electronica, rock or metal sounded simply decompressed and untangled, so there was more happening on my left, on my right. I felt music playing on different layers, so to speak, with a few notes closer to me, other were farther away, some to my right, some behind me, creating this 3D map of every track. If soundstage is what are you chasing for, SGD1 sounded very much like a Topic D90 and the Gustard A22, and it's really one of the best options if you want to increase depth and soundstage size in a very natural way. As for the frequency response, this is a very interesting part. So SGD1 is having an extended frequency response, so from the lowest octaves to the upper treble, and everything is super defined and clear. Yet a few things stood out very clearly from the rest. And first, of course, it was that super deep reaching, full-bodied, that hard punching bass performance. So it will be uncovering bass layers, bass notes from the most unusual places like folk music, like classical music. So anywhere I would hear double bass, my mind would simply focus on that slow air mass blob of sounds. Bass simply felt thumping hard. I really enjoyed listening to all types of rock and electronica with this one. Starting with 2 days ago, Van Halen was all over my playlist, so of course all that sounded really ballsy, really bold, raw, energetic. And no matter if I'm listening to some bass intensive music or not, SGD1 would always find those notes and highlight them to me, and I find that quite interesting and entertaining. As for the mid-range, SGD1 always sounded smooth, natural, warm, effortless. Unlike most Delta Sigma DACs, it was simply spot on with sweet harmonics and natural decay of the notes. It's hard to explain how it did it, but it just sounded right from the first seconds of pressing play. So I have experienced harsh and cramped and dry sounding sources, but this one was simply completely something else. So I'm very much into mid-centric music, and I'm simply against those V-shaped sound signatures. I think that mid-range is the most important part in the frequency response because the soul of the music and is lying exactly in here. Without it, acoustic music would simply sound empty, emotionless, less voices, simply less guttural, less weighty, and so on. And I think that SGD1 simply tilted towards well-made art war DACs. It simply resonated with them, so it has that smooth silk thread that is binding all the notes together, creating real music and not a fake rendition of it. As for treble, it's there in the right doses, so I hear it defined, clean, as the rest of the frequency response, but it never jumps ahead of the low end and of the mid-range. So it's extended even past the upper treble, but it never actually asks for my full attention. So I don't find it right. There isn't that nasty ringing in here. On the contrary, I find it smooth and quite more relaxed sounding. So I can listen to treble intensive music all day long with SGD1 on my table. Cymbals sounded extra crispy and really metallic somehow. Tambourines were snappy and engaging. Snare drum hits had a really good impact, so it simply had everything I wanted from my treble, except for that nasty ringing and harshness, which I can't stand for more than a few minutes. Overall, SGD1 had an amazing tonal balance, more on the fuller side in the bass and mid-range, and less so in the treble, so where it was simply more relaxed and easygoing, which made pairing with linear and neutral sounding amplifiers, speakers and headphones a much easier task. I also compared its performance in a headphone and also in a speaker-based setup with the A1 S8 and with the Matrix Audio Element X, which are considerably more expensive to the CGD1, but you wouldn't believe the outcome and the results of this comparison, which I recommend checking out in my written review below. It's on chapter 7 and it's one click away, and believe me, it's worth it. As for the conclusion, as a DAC-only device, it simply plays in the big league, and it simply sounded above my expectations, and in a less revealing system, I probably wouldn't differentiate this one from my own Matrix Audio Element X. I was so impressed by it that I'm going to award my Golden Award, and that tells a lot how I feel about it. Congrats to the team, and I'm looking forward to the next digital creatures. Now, before you go, I cannot stop from wondering how a higher-tiered Soncoz device with 2 Noratel transformers, with some bipolar input stage, with some GFET output stage, with some high-end Crystec femtosecond clocks would sound in the same chassis. I hope that Soncoz is up to the challenge. SGD1 was kindly provided by HiFiGo, and thank you for that. It will cost you $459, and it's my pleasure to recommend it as a DAC that can compete with the best there is. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. My full in-depth review, which is much more complete, can be found on my website. And in case you want to support this channel, please subscribe to it, and thank you for doing that. And as usual, listen to my music, be positive, and I'll see you soon. Cheers guys, bye bye.